The conference room fell silent as Jake Mason's phone buzzed against the polished mahogany table. 29 years old and worth $3.2 billion, Jake had built SocialSphere into the world's fastest-growing social media platform. Today was supposed to be the culmination of everything he'd worked for, the final investor meeting before tomorrow's IPO that would make him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. But something about this phone call felt different. "Excuse me for just a moment," Jake said to the 12 investors seated around the table. His assistant had strict instructions never to interrupt these meetings unless it was life or death. The caller ID showed a name he didn't recognize: William Harrison, attorney at law. "Mr. Mason?" The voice on the other end was elderly, refined, with a slight tremor that suggested urgency. "This is William Harrison. I represent the estate of Eleanor Blackwood. I need to ask you something that might sound strange, but it's of utmost importance." Jake glanced around the room at the waiting investors. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I'm in the middle of a crucial meeting. Can this wait until—" "Mr. Mason," the lawyer interrupted, his voice carrying a weight that made Jake pause. "Have you ever heard of the Blackwood family?" Jake frowned. The name meant nothing to him. "No, I haven't." "Why do you ask?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When William Harrison spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because, Mr. Mason, they are your real family. And you're about to inherit $2 billion. The phone nearly slipped from Jake's hand. Around the conference table, the investors began to shift uncomfortably, sensing something was wrong. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Mason, I know this is shocking, but I need you to listen carefully. Eleanor Blackwood passed away 3 days ago. According to her will, you are her sole heir. But there's something else, something about your identity that you need to know immediately." Jake felt the room spinning around him. "Mr. Harrison, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I don't know any Blackwoods. I grew up in foster care. I have no family." "That's exactly why I'm calling," the lawyer said gently. "Mr. Mason, I have reason to believe that everything you know about your origins is incorrect. Can you meet me today? This cannot wait." Jake looked around the conference room at the faces of investors who controlled the future of his company. But something in the lawyer's voice made it impossible to dismiss this call. "Where?" Jake heard himself asking. "The Blackwood estate. 1247 Fifth Avenue. How soon can you be here?" "I can be there in an hour." "Mr. Mason," William Harrison said before ending the call, "prepare yourself. What I'm about to show you will change everything you believe about who you are." An hour later, Jake stood before a massive Gilded Age mansion that took up half a city block on Fifth Avenue. This wasn't just wealth, this was old money, generational fortune that shaped cities. William Harrison turned out to be a thin, elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes. He greeted Jake in a wood-paneled library filled with more books than Jake had ever seen in one place. "Mr. Mason, thank you for coming. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to process, but I need you to hear the entire story." Jake gripped the arms of his leather chair as the lawyer opened a thick file. "The Blackwood family has been one of New York's most prominent families for over a century," William began. "Eleanor Blackwood was the last surviving member. She never married, never had children. But 29 years ago, she made a decision that would change 2 lives forever." The lawyer pulled out a manila envelope. Eleanor had a younger brother named Marcus. Marcus was troubled with addiction, poor choices, dangerous people. 29 years ago, Marcus came to Eleanor with a newborn baby, claiming it was his son. Jake felt his pulse quickening. Marcus begged Eleanor to take the child, to raise him as a Blackwood. But Eleanor was terrified not of raising a child, but of the dangerous people Marcus owed money to. People who might hurt an innocent baby to get back at Marcus. William paused, studying Jake's face. So Eleanor made an impossible choice. She took the baby to Brooklyn Hospital and left him there, with instructions that he be placed in foster care under a false name. She thought she was protecting him. The room tilted around Jake. "You're saying?" "I'm saying that you are Marcus Blackwood's son. Eleanor's nephew. You were born into one of the wealthiest families in America, but Eleanor gave you up to keep you safe." Jake stared at the lawyer. "But how do you know? How can you be certain?" William opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. "Eleanor kept everything. The original birth certificate with your real name, Marcus Blackwood Jr., medical records from your birth. And this." He handed Jake a photograph that made his breath catch. It showed a baby being held by a young man with Jake's own distinctive green eyes. "That's your father, Marcus Blackwood Sr. The photo was taken the day you were born." Jake studied the image, seeing his own features reflected in the stranger's face. The resemblance was unmistakable. "What happened to him?" William's expression grew sad. "He died 6 months after you were born. Drug overdose." Eleanor was devastated. She'd lost her brother and given up her nephew. "And she never tried to find me?" "She hired private investigators to check on you from a distance. She knew about your success with Social Sphere. She was incredibly proud of what you'd accomplished." Jake felt tears threatening. "She was proud of me?" "Immensely. She used to say that watching you succeed made her believe she'd made the right choice." William pulled out another document. "Eleanor spent the last 20 years setting up a trust fund for you. When she died, you became the sole heir to the Blackwood fortune." Jake looked at the legal documents, seeing impossible numbers. $2 billion? The estate includes this house, real estate investments, stock holdings, and liquid assets totaling just over $2 billion. It's all yours." Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, normal people went about their lives, unaware that everything Jake thought he knew about himself had just been destroyed. "If Eleanor knew where I was, why didn't she ever contact me?" "She was afraid that bringing you back into the Blackwood world might expose you to the same dangers she tried to protect you from. Your father had made enemies, serious people who hold grudges for decades." Jake turned back to the lawyer. "What kind of dangers?" "Your father borrowed money from organized crime figures. When he died, they considered the debt transferred to the family. Eleanor paid them off, but she was never certain they wouldn't come back." Jake felt a chill. "Are they still a threat?" "We don't believe so. But Eleanor wanted to be absolutely certain before she brought you back into this world." William handed Jake another document. "Eleanor left you a letter explaining her decision. Would you like to read it?" The letter was written in elegant handwriting. "My dear nephew, if you are reading this, then you finally know the truth about who you are. I have spent every day wondering if I made the right choice in giving you up. You are a Blackwood, Marcus. That name carries both privilege and responsibility. I gave you up because I was terrified that my brother's mistakes would destroy you. I see now that you became the man I believed you could be anyway. The money I'm leaving you is not a gift, it's a restoration. This fortune was always meant to be yours. Use it wisely, but remember that true wealth lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you build. I hope someday you can forgive an old woman for the choice she made out of love and fear. With all my love. Your Aunt Eleanor." Jake read the letter twice, tears flowing down his face. "She loved you very much," William said quietly. "I never knew her," Jake replied, his voice breaking. William showed Jake through the mansion rooms that could have been his nursery, spaces where he might have grown up. In what would have been his childhood bedroom, Jake imagined the life he'd never had. "What happens now?" Jake asked as they returned to the library. "That's up to you. The inheritance is yours regardless. You can remain Jake Mason, or you can reclaim the name Marcus Blackwood Jr. You can sell everything, or you can learn about your family's legacy." Jake looked around the library, seeing it now as something that belonged to him. "I need time to process this." "Of course. Take all the time you need." As Jake prepared to leave, William handed him a set of keys. "These are yours now. Eleanor wanted you to feel welcome here whenever you're ready." That night, Jake sat in his apartment, researching the Blackwood family history online. He learned about generations of entrepreneurs and philanthropists who'd shaped American business. His great-great-grandfather had built railroads. His great-grandfather had founded banks. These weren't just wealthy people, they were builders who'd used their resources to create lasting change. Jake thought about his own company, Social Sphere, and what the Blackwood legacy could become if he chose to embrace it. His phone rang. Sarah, his assistant. Jake, something strange is happening. We've had reporters calling asking about Marcus Blackwood and whether there's any connection to you. Jake's blood ran cold. What exactly did they say? They're asking if Jake Mason is actually Marcus Blackwood, heir to some massive fortune. Jake, what's going on? Jake realized that somehow, word of the inheritance had leaked. By tomorrow, his privacy would be shattered. Sarah, cancel all press interviews for tomorrow. It's true. And everything is about to change. The next morning, Jake was trending on social media. Photos of him at the Blackwood mansion had surfaced online, along with details about the inheritance. CNN was running segments about the billionaire orphan's secret fortune. Jake sat in his office, watching news coverage of his own life while fielding calls from reporters wanting interviews about the family he'd just discovered. William Harrison called with an apology. I'm sorry about the media leak. We're investigating how this became public. How much worse will it get? The Blackwood name is legendary. Everyone will want to be associated with the newly discovered heir. Jake watched his company's stock price fluctuate wildly as investors tried to interpret the news. Is there any way to make this stop? There is one option, William said carefully. You could reject the inheritance. Turn down the money, refuse to acknowledge the Blackwood connection. Is that legal? Absolutely. If you reject it, the money would go to Eleanor's charitable foundation. Jake stared out at Manhattan, thinking about Eleanor's choice 29 years ago and the choice he now faced. Accept his birthright and the responsibility of the Blackwood name, or reject it all and continue as Jake Mason. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Sarah entered with a concerned expression. Jake, there's someone here claiming to be your brother. Jake's heart stopped. That's impossible. He says there are things about the Blackwood family that Eleanor never told you. The man who entered was about 35, well-dressed but with an edge that suggested danger. He had Jake's dark hair and green eyes, but his smile was cold. Hello, brother, the man said. I'm David Blackwood, Marcus's older son. Jake stared in shock. William Harrison said Marcus only had one child. William told you what Eleanor wanted you to believe. But Marcus had two sons. You and me. David settled into a chair uninvited. Eleanor knew about me, but she chose to hide my existence because I didn't fit her narrative of protecting innocent babies. If you're really my brother, why didn't Eleanor mention you? David's expression hardened. Because Eleanor blamed me for Marcus's death. She thought I got him deeper into drugs and debt. When he died, she decided I was a bad influence who should be cut out of the family fortune. Jake studied David's face, looking for signs of deception. The physical similarities were undeniable, but something felt wrong. What do you want? Half, David said simply. Half of the inheritance. We're both Marcus's sons, so we should split what would have been his. After David left, Jake immediately called William Harrison. Mr. Harrison, someone claiming to be my half-brother just visited me. David Blackwood. There was a long pause. Mr. Mason, you need to be extremely careful around David Blackwood. Yes, he is Marcus's son, but he spent the last 15 years in and out of prison for fraud and assault. He's exactly the kind of dangerous person Eleanor was trying to protect you from. Jake felt his stomach drop. So he's really my brother? Biologically, yes. But David represents everything Eleanor feared, the criminal element that destroyed your father. Is he entitled to part of the inheritance? Eleanor's will specifically names you as sole heir, but David could challenge it in court. Eleanor believed that giving David access to the family fortune would dishonor the Blackwood name. Jake stared at David's documents on his desk. What should I do? Be careful. Don't meet with him alone. And don't let guilt about family connections cloud your judgment. That evening, Jake sat in the Blackwood mansion for the first time as its owner. In Eleanor's bedroom, he found photo albums including pictures of a young... Have you thought about my proposal? David asked. I've learned about your background. My criminal record exists because I've spent my life fighting for what should have been mine, David said. Eleanor had money and lawyers. I had to survive on the streets after Marcus died. Jake found himself sympathizing. What happened to you after Marcus died? Foster care, just like you. But I was 6 years old enough to remember being abandoned by family who could have saved me. The pain in David's voice seemed genuine. I'm sorry you went through that. I don't want pity. I want justice. We should have been raised together as brothers. We should split the inheritance 50-50 and work together to build something worthy of the Blackwood name. Jake looked around Eleanor's bedroom, imagining growing up with a brother. I need time to think. Time is a luxury we don't have. The media attention will attract other fraudsters claiming family connections. If we don't present a united front, we could both lose everything. 1 week, Jake said. Give me 1 week. 1 week, David agreed. But don't let others convince you to abandon your only real family. After ending the call, Jake walked through the mansion, thinking about the impossible choice he faced. Eleanor had given him up to protect him, but had she also deprived him of the brother he'd never known he had? In the library, Jake found Eleanor's final journal. The last entry, dated just days before her death, read, I pray that Marcus Jr. will understand why I made the choices I did. David represents the darkness that consumed Marcus, the anger, the entitlement, the willingness to hurt others for personal gain. I could not risk exposing Marcus Jr. to that influence, even if it meant they would never know each other as brothers. Some family connections are too dangerous to preserve. Jake closed the journal, finally understanding Eleanor's perspective. David wasn't just his brother, he was the embodiment of everything Eleanor had tried to save Jake from. The next morning, Jake made his decision. He called William Harrison. I'm accepting the inheritance, Jake said. And I'm rejecting David's claim. Eleanor was right to protect me from him. Are you prepared for David to challenge this in court? I'm prepared to honor Eleanor's wishes and use the Blackwood fortune the way she intended, to build something meaningful, not to enable someone who represents everything our family should stand against. Jake hung up and looked out at the city skyline. He was no longer just Jake Mason, the self-made tech billionaire. He was Marcus Blackwood Jr., heir to a legacy of builders and visionaries. For the first time since learning the truth about his identity, Jake felt ready to embrace both his past and his future. Eleanor had given him the greatest gift possible, not just wealth, but the wisdom to use it responsibly. He had finally found his family, his purpose, and his true self. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.